What's going on?
No, it wasn't him. That voice belonged to another man, and he was back in the here and now again. It had to have been the child's father.
Honey, I...
What's going on here?
Not what you think. I didn't know you were coming home so early.
So you can spread your legs for someone else?
The wanderer rose and tried to explain calmly. I was just passing through and the hospitality off, but was interrupted when the man's strong hand gave him a shove against his chest, which sent him back to the chair.
You be nice and shut up, friend.
He took a step towards the woman.
So this is how you thank me? My hard work?
No, please, it's not like that. I didn't mean to do anything with it.
I didn't mean to make trouble, spoke the wanderer who had risen again.
Friend!
The man turned to him.
Didn't I tell you to shut up?
He tried a reassuring gesture with his hands and took a few steps backwards. Look, I'm obviously causing trouble. I'm leaving your home, alright? You don't need to get upset and never see me again.
Piss off then, you cowardly hen!
The man grinned maliciously.
Someone like you certainly wouldn't have won my flower year over.
The wanderer smiled. Yes, exactly. I'm sorry to have disturbed you. And with those words he turned to the door and walked out, although he could almost feel the disappointed look on Billy's face burning on his back. When he had closed the door quietly behind him, he turned to Azar. Come on, big fella. Our path leads us on. He grabbed the leash and took the first few steps.
You bitch!
The shout echoed from the house and there was a clap. A moment later there was a rumble and a crash. His left hand gripped the leash tighter so that the leather creaked. He heard the woman start to cry and beg him not to hit the child. And at these words something flared in the wanderer's eyes.
You don't have to order me around at all, you whore!
The boy was huddled in a corner with his arms held out in front of him. His mother stood between him and the man. After he had knocked her aside again, she simply stood between them again. Blood ran from a laceration on her cheek.
You stupid woman.
The man's voice had a threatening undertone. Now he clenched the flat of his hand into a fist and raised it slowly.
Get out of my way.
But then the man paused. His wife was no longer looking at him at all, but behind him. He jerked around. There, the guy from before actually dared to stand.
Didn't I tell you to piss off? This is none of your business. If you hit those two once more.
The woman saw an almost sickening absolution in his eyes. Something that seemed as if it would devour everything that stood in his way. Something she hadn't sensed even the faintest way in this man before, now seemed to be all there ever was to him.
What then, huh? Is the wimp trying to think up big words?
He had stood in front of the wanderer. He was a whole head taller than him and wider to boot.
You better get out of here before I break your dainty neck.
The wanderer just stood there, looking up at the man who seemed like a towering shadow in his eyes.
You are worthless.
It echoed in his mind, and the echo called out many times.
Worthless. A failed project. You could have been the shield of Sanctor. Instead, you are its greatest failure.
The man snorted as the wanderer's left punched itself into the pit of his stomach. He felt stomach acid make its way up his throat and immediately drip from his lips. The blow was so violent that he instinctively doubled over and wrapped his arms around his stomach. The woman had taken the boy in her arms and pressed herself into the corner as best as she could.
You,
groaned the man.
You miserable son of a bitch.
Abruptly he straightened up and struck at the stranger's face with his fist, but it got stuck in the grip of the intruder's left hand. Not only that, he felt as if he had struck granite. He screamed in pain as the wanderer pushed his fist through backwards so hard it cracked loudly.
What monster are you?
Was all he could say before he got his head grabbed and smashed against the table. A strangled scream was heard from the woman as the man slumped in front of him. He remained motionless on the ground. The wanderer bent down and felt at his neck with 2 fingers.
You should get out of here.
He then made it clear to the woman.
Have you?
He shook his head.
No, but when he wakes up again, I'm sure he won't be in a good mood.
You really shot him,
cheered Billy, but the wanderer looked at him reprehensibly.
That's no reason to gloat, young man,
he pointed out to him.
You'd better remember that's no way to resolve conflicts.
Turning to the woman again, he continued.
When I said you should get out of here, I meant to another place. Do you have somewhere to go for an indefinite period of time?
Still gripped by bewilderment, the woman's eyes began to fix on unspecified points in the room. before she said a moment later, I have relatives in the islands of Lona further up north.
Then you should pack your things, take the boy and leave for here as soon as possible.
It is the middle of winter. I don't have a horse and I don't know if my supplies will last until then.
She slid down the wall to the floor.
Do you think I wouldn't have left by now if it were that easy? No. Instead you come and make it worse. He would surely have regained.
She felt the young man's hand grab her by the shoulders. Not hard, but not indeterminately either.
I don't know what you fell in love with then, but it certainly isn't that anymore, is it?
She looked at her husband, who was still lying on the ground but had since let out a slumbering murmur.
You don't have to live like this.
My Thorin.
She sank her face into her hands and began to cry. Billy rushed to her side and wrapped his arm around her.
I never thought I'd have to listen to something like that from someone like you. Let it.
She sobbed.
You need to stay strong for a while longer, okay?
The Wanderer explained to her gently.
Think of your boy. Where exactly do your relatives live?
She noticed and wiped her tears on her sleeve.
In Grailville. That is very close to the lake of Equilibrium.
Very good. Deviantart is not far from there. There you have a town for all the things you need. This should be able to be reached and left again in a day even on foot, and if we set off now and walk 6, 7, 8 hours a day, we could reach Grailville in 2 to 3 days already.
Me?
I will accompany you until then,
he assured her with a smile, whereupon the boy's spirit was immediately on fire.
Oh yes! We will have many adventures on the journey. Please, Mummy. Please, please, please. Please let us go, will you?
He rattled her sleeve.
I don't want to stay with Dad any longer. It's stupid with him. And I don't want him to hit you once more either.
Tears came to her eyes again. She blinked hard and it was obvious she was trying to hold them back. Her gaze shifted from the boy to her husband, who mumbled as if he had just collapsed drunk. From her memory she knew that the image was not so far-fetched. The boy was still pleading and practically hanging on her sleeve.
What choice do I have?
She finally said resignedly.
You won't regret it.
The child grabbed the poker and started poking the air with it.
I'll protect you too.
But then his father crossed into his field of vision and he lowered his arm with the poker in his hand until it touched the ground.
Hey,
he noticed when the Wanderer put a hand on his shoulder.
There's no shame in not being able to directly banish a danger,
he explained to the child, also glancing briefly at the woman.
Sometimes it's so overwhelming that there's nothing you can do but persevere. And you two have really managed to do that remarkably well. As long as you do your best, because that's all anyone can ask of you.
He straightened up, pointed with his thumb over his shoulder to the man and now spoke more directed to the woman.
What he has done is much easier. Swinging your fist like that because you give in to your own frustration. But to be at the fist for the love of what once was, he nodded. That requires much more strength.
She said nothing, but his words seemed to awaken a spark deep in her eyes.
But tell me, does your husband know about your relatives in Grailville?
Hannelore shook her head.
Good. We don't want him to follow you there.
She nodded and then turned to Billy.
Come. We'll take what we need and set off for a new life.